Alex Pretti, a 40-year-old ICU nurse, became the first victim of what was supposed to be a controlled operation. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Robert, an ordinary American citizen, not affiliated with any government agency or political party. I sit here in my home office, discussing issues specific to my country and issues of the world in general. I'm not a journalist by title, but I care about truth, accountability, and the stories that shape our country. Today, we're diving into a case that has captured the attention of Americans and the world alike. A case that raises questions about power, oversight, and the limits of authority in modern America. It's a story of one man's death, a federal operation, and a nation grappling with justice and truth. By the end of this episode, you'll see why the events of January 24th have ignited protests, investigations, and national debate. On that morning, Minneapolis woke to an unfamiliar sight. Armored vehicles, federal agents, and sirens blaring across the city. Authorities called it Operation Metro Surge, aimed at alleged criminal networks, but the reality on the streets was far more alarming. By midday, Alex Pretti, a 40-year-old ICU nurse, became the first victim of what was supposed to be a controlled operation. Videos show Pretti standing calmly on a sidewalk, holding nothing but his phone as heavily armed agents approached.
The officers attempted to disarm this individual, but the armed suspect reacted violently. Fearing for his life and for the lives of his fellow officers around him, an agent fired defensive shots. Medics were on the scene immediately and attempted to deliver medical aid to the subject, but he was pronounced dead at the scene. The suspect also had 2 magazines with ammunition in them that held dozens of rounds. He also had no ID. This looks like a situation where an individual arrived at the scene to inflict maximum damage on individuals and to kill law enforcement.
Within seconds, gunfire erupted, shocking witnesses and setting the city on edge. Officials claimed he posed an armed threat, but video evidence immediately contradicted this narrative. Pretti was unarmed, non-aggressive, and merely trying to help a woman who had collapsed nearby. The government insisted the use of lethal force was justified, reinforcing its narrative despite clear evidence. By evening, crowds gathered in downtown Minneapolis, chanting his name, demanding accountability and transparency.
And I saw the news about what happened to Alex, and I found it revolting. I just very frustrated. I felt very helpless.
Reaction is pouring in here in Seattle and across the country to the Minneapolis shooting.
Protesters carried signs reading "Unarmed, Justice for Pretti, and Truth Matters," reflecting widespread public anger. The protests quickly spread beyond the city, signaling a nationwide demand for answers and justice. Federal agents responded with tear gas, mass detentions, and aggressive crowd control, escalating tensions further. Journalists began dissecting the event, pointing out discrepancies in official reports and timelines. Legal analysts questioned why lethal force was authorized so quickly and why local authorities were minimally involved. Internal communications later revealed confusion and conflicting orders within federal agencies overseeing the operation. This lack of clarity left no one fully accountable, deepening public frustration and distrust. Civil rights organizations filed lawsuits alleging constitutional violations and overreach by federal authorities. The nation began questioning the limits of authority and whether oversight had failed in this critical moment. Meanwhile, social media amplified eyewitness accounts, spreading footage of the event and protests across the country. The contrast between official statements and video evidence can be impossible to ignore. Political commentators debated the legality and ethics of the operation on national news platforms. Even local law enforcement officials privately called the operation reckless and poorly planned. As days passed, confidence in federal agencies sharply declined, reflecting a growing national mistrust. The death of Alex Pretti became a symbol of systemic issues: militarized responses, weak oversight, and conflicting truths. Editorials warned that if unchecked authority goes unchallenged, fundamental rights are at risk of erosion. Public demonstrations persisted, demanding justice, accountability, and policy changes to prevent future tragedies. Investigative journalists uncovered internal memos showing unclear objectives and contradictory directives. The federal government faced increasing scrutiny as citizens questioned why deadly force was used without proper cause. Families, communities, and activists worked together, turning grief into organized civic action and advocacy. Across the nation, protests highlighted the gap between institutional authority and citizen rights. Meanwhile, government statements avoided direct confrontation with the evidence captured on video. The footage remained undeniable. Pretti, unarmed, shot in broad daylight, with witnesses corroborating the event. This gap between narrative and reality fueled anger, distrust, and a broader debate about the use of power. The incident became a turning point, forcing citizens and officials alike to confront uncomfortable truths. As investigations were promised, timelines remained vague, leaving families and communities waiting. The case had become a national test of limits on oversight, accountability, and the ethical use of force. Alex Pretti's death challenged the idea that authority is always justified in the absence of transparency. Communities demanded reform, while federal agencies struggled to respond to mounting evidence and public outrage. Media coverage kept the story alive, framing it as a battle between citizen rights and unchecked authority. Editorials, social media, and civic organizations amplified the call for accountability at every level. The nation watched closely as hearings, lawsuits, and investigations slowly unfolded, keeping attention focused on systemic accountability. Despite official reassurances, citizens remained skeptical, demanding proof that oversight mechanisms would function. The story of Alex Pretti had transcended one city, becoming a symbol of power, oversight, and the struggle for justice. As federal investigations slowly unfold, the nation watches closely, waiting to see if anyone will be held accountable. The ultimate question remains, will justice reach those responsible, or will this tragedy set a precedent for unchecked authority? From my perspective, this case shows how unchecked power can hurt ordinary citizens and erode trust in institutions. What steps do you think we can take to prevent such tragedies in the future? Stay engaged, stay vigilant, and thank you for watching.